going on, everybody? We are back with another episode of The Jungle. And, like I have told you guys, this recent season that we're in, season three, I wanted to get more females on here. A lot of the people I've talked to, females are a lot of times hesitant to come on. They aren't really they're guarded, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I've met quite a few really amazing females who have been willing to come on and share their stories. And today I have Lisa Parson, who is she's currently a counselor at Sky Point Recovery in Akron. She was just recently a clinical supervisor and program administrator at Pinnacle Recovery. I met Lori through Victoria Smith, Tori Smith, who did my Toryland episode. So, without further ado, guys, this is Lisa. Lisa, say hi to everybody.
Hey, everybody.
All right, Lisa. So, you've kind of had, just from what you and I have talked about, you kind of had a wild ride getting into everything. You're also in recovery. You sponsor some females. You currently work with mostly men, but you found your calling more in counseling than being like a program supervisor or program admin, so on and so forth. So, just briefly, why don't you tell everybody, what was growing up like for you? What was your childhood like? What was early addiction like? Maybe if there's any trauma you want to touch on, tell us who Lisa is.
That's the crazy thing is I'm one of those people who didn't have any type of trauma. I had a great childhood growing up. My parents are still married today. They've been married for 56 years. No addiction in my background. I was a people pleaser. No trauma. My trauma came afterward. As a result of my youth. But I had a. I mean, it was I had all my basic needs were met. I had everything I wanted. All the kids in the neighborhood were always at my house, but I was always one of those people who just whenever they said don't do that, I had to do it just to see what it was like.
Yeah, that's it's funny that a lot of the people that I've had on here, they most of them have come from pretty decent childhoods, but it's that rebellious instinct inside of them that they want to see what everything
Yeah, if they say
they're in those dare meetings and they're like, well, that kind of looks fun. I don't know what they're talking all this doom and gloom for.
yeah, if
So,
they say don't go past this telephone pole, oh, I went past it just to see what it
yeah.
was all about. So
So
I mean, I just I wanted to fit in everywhere I went. I just didn't feel like I belonged. I don't know why, but I would hang out with the jocks, with the burnouts, with the smart kids, and I would take on their persona. Whatever they were doing, that's what I would do just to fit in.
I was the same way, and I came from a really good home. I I lined up with I was always friendly with everybody. I was friends with everybody. I just wanted to fit in. And if you were doing drugs, I was doing drugs. If we were robbing a liquor store, I guess I was robbing the liquor store with you to fit
Yeah.
in. Uh, so what kind of so let's talk about what led you into, you came from a good childhood. What led you into, was it just the trying to fit in, and where did all that start?
The bright lights, all the excitement of it all. It just started out with some weed, and some drinking beer in the woods, and then when we got our licenses, because it wasn't like it is today, you could,
Yeah.
ride around all night long listening to the radio drinking. It wasn't all OVI crazy like it is today. The cops would just say, you idiots, get home. Um, it didn't really hit the harder stuff until later in life, but yeah, just overindulging.
So there's always you've always had the want for, sorry, I'm trying to get my volume up on you a little bit here. I'm having a hard time hearing you. So there's just always been the overindulging. So tell me about when things started to turn south then. Like when did the driving on the back roads with a case of beer and just smoking some weed start to change to where it was no longer fun?
I think it was
Was
about
it criminal
18,
charges?
when I was about 18, when I moved out of my parents' house, that's when, cocaine became the thing and dropping acid. And it was like, it became it got to be not so much fun anymore because I was selling it. I couldn't just do it. I always had to go further. So if I was doing it, I had to sell it. I had to be that person people sought out. I mean, if it wasn't just to have fun, it was because I had the drug. I continued with those people pleasing behaviors way into my 30s and 40s.
Yeah. So how old were you? So you started obviously trafficking in cocaine, trafficking in drugs. You and I had talked a little briefly. I mean, you got linked up with a pretty notorious motorcycle club. Was there? I mean, was there trouble like early on growing up? I mean, I know you said you were getting pulled over and thing. The cops would kind of let you guys go, but there was
Nothing. I mean, that was the thing.
nothing.
It was really nothing, with when that part of my life came about. I was 30, I believe 30 years old when I met the man who would become my husband, who was in the notorious motorcycle club. And that's when I was introduced to methamphetamine,
Uh,
and all the other drugs went away.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
took center stage. That was it.
And guys, I want to just say, we here on the show, we respect everybody. I've got a couple buddies that are in MCs, and as Lisa and I talked, we're not going to give notoriety. Obviously, that's not but we're not going to get on here and talk about what the clubs were. I just want anybody that might check into this to understand we respect all clubs' privacies and so on and so forth. But so what was life like once you started doing the meth? I mean, that was so at this point, I think what you've communicated is you were basically doing it for fun and to
Hmm.
take it to another level. So there was obviously an element of addiction there, but so then you get into meth, and that's where the real addiction, I'm assuming, kicks in. And
Yeah,
what kind of
that's when it really took off, and it wasn't just an addiction. Wasn't just an addiction to the drug, it was an addiction to making the drug, it was addiction to the lifestyle associated with the drug. It consumed my entire life, every
yeah,
aspect of my life. It took over. There wasn't anything I did in my life that didn't include that drug.
yeah. Well, and as drug addicts, I mean that's every drug addict. That's every it's the lifestyle you become accustomed to. It's the people you're hanging around with. It's the daily grind of just trying to get what you need and trying to and you get so engulfed in that, and it takes some serious struggling as far as your mentality goes, changing your mindset, your perception to get out of things like that. So just talk about a little bit about your time maybe with the club, making methamphetamines, doing methamphetamines. I mean, it was
The
obviously,
crazy thing is, everybody hears that and they think about the Sons of Anarchy. I lived this
yeah,
glamorous life. It wasn't nothing like that. I was
yeah,
the one doing wrong. My husband wasn't, he was home. Of course, he did it with me, but I was the one out doing the bad shit. It wasn't a life like everybody thinks it was. Sure, when I was welcome every place we went. We'd go anywhere in the United States. The red carpets rolled out. We did all this stuff because of who he was. It had nothing to do with who I was. I just so happened to be his wife. Um, and I was kind of protected, so I could be a dumbass, and nobody would mess with me. But at the same time, that brought more heat on me because, there was always feds or somebody following us. And I don't know why at some point I just thought I was invincible, that I was untouchable, you know. And it was just in my mind, it was fun. I was having a great time. I was living large. I was a rock star, I was a celebrity doing all this stuff. And when it became not fun is when the government really got involved with the chemicals used in the manufacture of this drug. So before, I would have boosters, the guys out stealing, bringing me bags fulls of Sudafed and generic Sudafed. I mean, bags, trash bags full. So I was making an enormous amount of methamphetamine. There was an endless supply.
yeah,
Well, when the government got involved, when they were realizing, hey, We got to do something about this. We can't have it on the shelf. We need to put it behind the shelf. And now you got to show your ID. That's when everything took a turn for bad. So all the people who are just having a good time, and I was making sure everybody around me had a good time. If I was going out of town, you were going out of town. If I was buying new clothes, you were getting them. So all this stuff came to an abrupt halt. And it became really hard. It was really hard to make a living doing this. So the ounces and ounces and ounces of meth that I had flowing started becoming just a couple of grams if it worked. And that's when it got super hard. So I had to learn how to perfect that and learn how to come up with new, more creative ways. And I did.
I mean, how long did this whole, as far as your meth addiction and so on and so forth, how long did this whole kind of circus ride go on?
10 years.
10 years?
10 years.
So, during those 10 years, I mean, was there any points where things just got, I mean, do you have maybe a story or something just got, it was like a waking up moment or something? I mean, obviously riding, the buddies of mine that are in clubs, obviously they are very low key. It's not what everybody thinks.
Nope.
But they are also a couple of the wildest boys that I've ever met in my life. So there had to be some pretty wild times in there. When was the moment where you were like, what, I mean, was it when the Sudafed was drying up? Was it when things were just starting to go?
Look, when everything hit me, it hit me all at once. My husband was 12 years older than me. He was also, he had heart issues. He was diabetic. He shouldn't have been partying at all. And when everything hit me, it hit me all at once. I got busted. My husband died, and everything changed with the government all at the same time. At the same time, my life crashed. I mean, I hit, when they say hitting a brick wall, I hit it going 200 miles an hour. And I didn't know what to do. I got busted twice in a matter of 3 weeks.
Okay. So during those, I mean, after those busts, was there prison time? Was there incarceration?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk real briefly. Where were you in? I mean, because obviously the jungle, that's kind of the basis of, I've had quite a few people on that haven't been there, but I mean, it's overcoming adversity. Tell me about what prison was like. I mean, it was obviously, I'm assuming if you were running around with the people you were running around with, it wasn't your first like jail stint, but it was the first time you were going down the road. So where did you end up? What were your charges? What did you end up incarcerated for? What was the whole experience like?
All right, so my last time I ever got in trouble with anything less arrest was, I remember the date too, it was August 18th of 2007, and I was arrested for chemicals used in the manufacture of methamphetamine in possession. And then October the 29th is when my husband dropped dead. So I was going through all this stuff, and I didn't actually end up, I was allowed to turn myself in because of all the stuff going on. So I turned myself in to go to prison. It was April 4th of 2008. That's my sobriety date, by the way. And I had gone to Marysville. I was in Marysville for quite a while, and I was supposed to have 2 years, a definite sentence, because under the new House bills, that's what it was, a definite sentence. There was no more tails. And there was really no more judicial release. So it was 2-year definite sentence. And I got sentenced, and it just so happened to be by a visiting judge who forgot to use the word mandatory in my sentence. So when I got to Marysville, they kept saying, hey, you are eligible for this intense prison program, this AOD, alcohol and other drug program. It's like a rehab boot camp. I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm definite sentence. And they kept coming to me saying, no, you are eligible for this. And I'm like, all right, yeah, if you think I am, go ahead and, run with it. And I'll be damned if the paperwork didn't come back and I was approved to go to this rehab boot camp. And I was like, get out of here. So I ended up getting transferred from uh, Marysville, from the Ohio Reformatory for Women, ORW, to Franklin pre-release in Columbus. And that's where they house the pregnant women and anybody in this alcohol and other drug, AOD, IPP, in intense prison program. That's where you went. And the program was 3 months long. And I mean, this was no joke. We're talking boot camp, 3 months. And I was eligible to be released on December 10th or December 1st of 2008. And I'm like, man, the minute I get out, they are going to come and say, oh, we made a mistake. And they didn't. Even when I got out, my attorney was like, how the hell are you out? You know what? Nobody understood, but it was because they forgot to use that word mandatory. But while I was in there, I mean, when I tell you it was intense, it was intense. You were up every morning at 5:00. Your room had to be meticulous. I mean, these guys running this place, it was no joke. If one person messed up, everybody took the hit.
Yeah.
It was military style boot camp. And I don't know how I made it through it, but I did.
Well, you working out of Akron right now as a counselor. I'm sure you've heard of NeoCap.
Oh, yeah.
And NeoCap, from what it sounds like, is a very similar program. At least when I went through it, and they, I don't know as far as the intensity.
NeoCap ain't got nothing on that program. Nuh-uh.
Okay. Well, I was there 10 years ago. Well, it was 8 years ago, and I have very much so heard that it's kind of, and I'm not going to talk negatively about it because I will say that level of program. Now, I had to do my prison sentence and then come home and go into that program, which is kind of unheard of because it's what they call a in lieu of like program. Like you go there instead of going to prison. I unfortunately got to do my whole prison sentence and then go to NeoCap for 3 months. But back then it was very similar where they gave you the classes. It was thinking for a change, and it was all these groupings and classes and therapy and so on and so forth. And you were up every morning early, and you had a job, and you had to sit and study all day. But
7 days a week and never stop.
Yep, and I will tell you, as pissed as I was that I had to go into that program, I think that program did more for me than prison and jail and so on and so forth, because I had been to a couple rehabs, and I always fluffed it off because I always had that other run still in me. I would go into rehab to shut everybody else up. But once I went to prison, that's where I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. Then going into NeoCap, it gave me kind of, I wanted to do it. I wanted to be better. So I was actually taking in things that they were saying, So I think programs like that are good. Unfortunately, let's talk real quick. So how long did you do in Marysville total?
I think I was only in Marysville for about 3 months.
Okay. So then there was no. So let me ask you real quick then, because I believe you are the first person I've had in from Marysville. What are your thoughts on? I always like to ask guys this that come on. What are your thoughts on what the issues are with the current prison system?
I actually wrote a whole paper on this.
Did you?
Yeah, I wrote a whole paper on this when I got into college after I got out. The one thing they call it is the Ohio Department for Rehabilitation and Correction. And the paper that I wrote was the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. Where the hell is the rehabilitation? What I see the problem is they're taking young people, especially these young men, who've never really been in trouble before, barely, 18, 19 years old, and for low-level drug crimes, and they're putting them in prison instead of putting them where they really need, and that's some rehab. They need some help, and they're just pumping out better criminals. Because once you get in,
criminals, yeah, they're pumping out. It teaches you how to be a better criminal.
And because there's nothing in there. There's no rehabilitation.
No, there's not.
And you've got to have some serious time to be able to get into any of the programs they have.
Yeah.
You get in there and they might have something stupid that you'll never freaking use.
Yeah.
But the really good programs that could really teach you a trade, unless you got years, you ain't getting in them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's always a
And
waiting list, and
it's
it's
just really
always
sad what I saw. Even the 12-step meetings, they were few and far between. Even the treatment, like they had tapestry for women. You had to have a serious amount of long time to get in there. So what I see is they're just warehousing people to get that number, to get that money, and to pump them out. And the problem is then you have that number attached to you, that stigma. You're defined
bring you
by
back.
that, but by the fact that you're a convict.
Yeah.
And
So
so therefore you're not eligible for a whole lot of stuff. And the only difference between you and them is they got caught.
Yep.
And
I
it's
preach
sad.
on it. Yeah, I preach on this all the time, and I go off about it in all my episodes, and that's part of the reason I started this. It's kind of the preface for it is just to bring, just to kind of let everybody know that everybody thinks that going to prison means reform. Everybody thinks it means they're going away, and yeah, it's a punishment, but there's programs and there's ways for these guys to get better, and there's not. It's unless you walk through those doors and you make a solid cognizant decision that I'm coming out swinging and I'm doing better. I'm going to be better. Unless you do that while you're in there, there's nothing. There's
And you
nothing
got to
there
do
for
that
you.
yourself, because unless
Exactly.
you're sentenced to some years, you're not going to get that from there. You're not.
Exactly. And it's interesting because America's the largest for-profit. I think we are actually at this point one of the only countries that do for-profit prisons.
Oh yeah,
And
the private prisons going on now.
yeah,
People are
and I
banking
I
off
was
of it. They're capitalizing off of
yeah,
of this, and it's awful.
and that was CCA of America. They ran most of the federal prison system. They're a private company, and Lake Erie. When I was sentenced, they had just taken over Lake Erie, and it was off the walls. It was nuts. There was
I mean,
extortion. There was
just think
violence.
about
There
it.
was
If your
drugs.
family wants to send anything to you, they've banked off of that just to be able to
Yeah,
call home. They banked off of that. So you know
yeah,
what? The people in prison aren't just the ones in prison anymore. Now it's your families,
yeah,
because they got to work basically two jobs just to make sure you're okay. Because that
yeah,
$20 stay pay ain't giving you shit. Because
yeah,
it's not like people think. They don't provide you with everything in there. They don't.
yeah,
Even if you go to the doctor, you got to pay for that in there. How are you going to do that? Your family has to help you. And they
yeah.
make it so expensive. So your family's doing that time with you.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I and I just posted about my mom yesterday because she stood by me, and yesterday was her birthday, and I made a funny little Facebook post for her birthday. But 10 years ago, I was dragging her through the mud. 15 years ago, I was dragging her through the mud, and we have a great relationship today. But I look back at everything that I did, even through prison, and you're absolutely right. And now I'm like, now her and I, there's been forgiveness. Like we're on a great level at this point, but I still look back at those times and I'm like, dude, like my family, I dragged them through my prison sentence with me. So yeah,
Yeah,
you're
they
absolutely
they
right.
they did
It's
the
not,
time with you.
yeah. Yeah, and there's no forgiveness with the state. And then you get some of these correctional facilities where your family's having to get patted down. Your kids are coming in for visits and they're getting patted down. Like you're talking 3, 4, 5-year-old kids. They don't understand what's going on, but the
Nope.
guards patting them down. It's scary. It's traumatizing. It's ridiculous on a lot of levels. I did an episode with a guy, Michael Covington, great guy. He's a DOT SAP out in California. He's written a couple books. He has a podcast, but he has done a lot of work with the California prison system on they are starting to integrate the same idea of prison systems that they have over in like Switzerland and Amsterdam and things like that, where it's like there all it is reform. It's there's levels.
Yeah, I've
You're
watched
locked
that.
up and
It's amazing.
yeah, and
You
for
don't hear
anybody that
about the crime in those countries like you do here.
and that's
You
and
don't.
that's yeah, and that's what's wild is their recidivism rates have like plummeted because they're actually giving these guys skills. They're not giving them a number on their back that they have to walk around with for the rest of their lives. I was a big gun guy before I got into all my trouble, and so I just recently found out I could restore gun rights. So I'm
Mhm.
working to do that. I just found out, and I like to continuously broadcast this over this show because a lot of people don't understand these things. The state of Ohio also. I talked to a friend of mine. She's a paralegal. I believe right now, and I'm talking to an attorney about it, but you can expunge after COVID because of the shortage of people. You can now, where it was one felony, you can now expunge. It's either 3 or 5. I have a consult with this attorney guy set up
Yeah,
for I think it's a week or so.
I was looking into that, but you know what? It gives me my street cred with what I do. I really don't care
Well,
at this point. With what I do, it's not holding me back at all. It actually helps me out.
I'm a truck driver, so and not to keep name dropping guys. Sonny Von Cleveland, he was one of the he's another guy from California, great guy. Has his own foundation. He came on in the first episode or in the first 3 minutes. He made a comment and it stuck with me. He said, my bonus is actually, or my felony is actually a bonus to my resume. And I've kind of like built a lot of like my confidence as far as having felonies off that because it is like, and you get a lot of guys that are like, no, you have to carry that the rest of your life. But it shows people you can overcome adversity. It shows people you fought through the hard times. It shows people that you can overcome life when shit gets hard. Uh, but I'm a truck driver. It's not detrimental to my lifestyle either. Do I want to drive semi the rest of my life? No. But people need to understand they get these felonies, and as to where it was 5, 10 years ago, you couldn't get these things expunged. That's why I like bringing it up continuously on the show because people need to understand if it's been a absolute detriment to your lifestyle, you can. I'm like
Well,
you.
look,
I'm like,
I used my actual court records. I cited them and deemed myself an expert on methamphetamine when I was in college. I
yeah,
actually went to the dean. They were like challenging me, and I'm like, "Go ahead. If I'm not, who is? If
yeah,
I'm not, hey, I was a damn good criminal. Check it out, and
yeah,
they allowed me to do that.
yeah.
So I got
No,
all those things hanging behind me on the wall, you
yeah.
know, um, using those prison or those court
You should get
docs.
one that says expert criminal.
Oh, that's why I tell people when I go in for interviews, I'm like, I got 2 master's degrees, I've got an AA degree, and I got a PhD on the street. You
Yeah.
know, um, that's what I got.
No, and I don't. Again, yes, it doesn't bug me to have my felonies on my record. Obviously, I'm like you. I use it as street cred. I showcase it. I'm like, I've made an amazing life for myself, and I've done it with these felonies not being expunged. I've done it with my my wife always jokes because I'm in the process of writing a book, and she was like, "Why are you writing a book?" She's like, "Just print out your court docket." She was like, "It's already like 40 pages long," and I'm like,
Yeah, I
"Well,
get it. With
um,
me, it's like, do I want to put all that money into it? Do I need to? With what I do, it really doesn't make a difference if they're there or not. For me, I think it's almost like I look at that and then where I'm at today, and it shows me how far I've come. So, I
yeah.
mean, it
Well,
really
that's never
doesn't
gonna
bother
go
me.
away
Now, if I was
regardless.
getting into another area in my life where I would need that, of course I would do it,
Yeah.
and I
Well,
could.
and I'll tell you, I mean, I was a production and safety manager when I came home from prison. I started off, worked my way up with this company. It was a very toxic environment. Didn't want to work there anymore, and I started going on interviews. And I had 5 different jobs lined up, and every one when I would go in to accept a job, they would never ask me during, but when I would go and accept it, it was they're sliding the background check sheet across. So my felony's only being 5 years. I'm like, they all loved me. They're like they all thought I would be a great asset to their company. But as soon as they caught wind of my felony, it's like, well, we're not
Yep,
sure we
they
want you
stop
here.
it.
And so in an instance like that, that's why I could make the same money driving a semi. So I went into driving semis.
Well,
Well, at this
I
point,
was actually one of the first, I believe it was 10 people when they came out with that certification qualification for employment, that CQE that basically says, as per the state of Ohio, you've been successfully rehabilitated. I was one of the first 10 people to get that document.
oh really? That's awesome.
Mhm.
That's cool. Yeah, I know a few people that have gotten that. but yeah, so I mean, in somebody like my instance, I kind of feel like maybe I do need to get them expunged. I mean, obviously, I used to enjoy playing with guns. My dad had tons of them. I grew up around them. I loved hunting. I loved doing all that. And so when I found out I could do it, I was like, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to see if it works. So
I just tell
we'll
them all,
see.
the state of Ohio frowns upon me having weapons. I'm the same way. My dad and brother, and they all have guns, and
Yeah.
to carry conceals, and it's something I might look into. Because
Well,
I
I'll
can.
stay tuned because I on my YouTube page, I'll send you a link to it. I'll probably post everything on Facebook as well. I'm going to document the whole process so people, and then put it out there so people know and understand maybe who to get in contact, how to do it. So, but all right, that's a little off topic here. Let's get back to it. So the prison system. So you was there a moment in prison? I mean, at what point did you make up your mind to where this is it? I mean, you said what, August 8th, 2008 was when was your sober date?
August 4th, 2008 was the
August.
day I
Okay.
walked into the Summit County Jail to begin my prison sentence.
Okay.
And I'll never forget that. As long as I live, my two best friends were taking me. I already had my whites on. I went in, white t-shirt, white. Anybody who's been to county, you already know what that means. White t-shirt, white bra, white panties, white socks, sweats, and I'm walking in, and I stopped, and I turned around, and I walked back to the car, and they were like, "Do you want to run?" I said, "No, man." I said, "Take my shoes." They were like, "What?" I'm like, "I can't take my shoes. Take my shoes." I walked in there with no shoes on, ready. It's like, let's do this. I think at that point, I was so tired of everything that had gone on. I mean, my life took a hit. I mean, a hard hit in the course of 6 months. Like I said, my husband died. I got busted twice. My whole life was spiraling. I was using like crazy, up for days. I was tired, man. I was tired. I just wanted to sit down.
Yeah.
And it was when I got there, I don't know. It was kind of weird. When I got there, nothing really resonated with me till it was about a month. Whoop. Are you still
Hey,
there?
yeah, I'm here. It's saying restart some hard disk space.
Saw that something about it ran out of something about recording.
I don't think it's gonna let me. Let me here. Let's do this. I'm gonna pause this recording.
Okay.
I'm gonna close out my browser, reopen it, click that link, and try and sign back in.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I don't know why it's doing.
It's okay.
I've never seen this before. So give me 1
So you
second.
want me to leave
I'm
it
gonna
and come
close.
back in?
Yeah, I'm gonna close all this out. I'm gonna boot you out of here and then come back in, and I'll start